Hey there, Emma from Paint Wild. In this video, we are learning how to turn 3 primary watercolors into 12 and create a color wheel. If you're not sure which 3 primary colors to use, it's not just as simple as grabbing a yellow, red, and blue because they're not called that at the art store, first of all, and there's like a million of them. So if you're not sure which 3 primary colors are best for you and which to choose, check out last week's video. It is all about just that. I go through considerations you might want to take into account when choosing the primaries for you, color characteristics that might impact your choices, and I'll show you a bunch of different color wheels that I've created, subbing different yellow, reds, and blues in and out to give you an idea of what you can use and the results you'll get from them. So just as a bit of a recap as to why I even mix from the primary colors, it was what really helped me understand and get a grip on watercolor when I was just starting out. Like a lot of people, I just got really overwhelmed with the sheer number of supplies plus techniques. There's just so many variables in watercolor that cutting down the supplies really helped me be able to get a grasp of things sooner. And then you can expand later once you do. Not only that, you can save money. Instead of going out and buying every color under the sun when you get started, you can just buy 3, learn how to do more with less, and then expand your kit later. Or you can invest that money into 3 really good primary colors. It can also help you create more harmonious portraits because every color you mix from them is all going to relate back to just those 3. And when you're just learning about colors and maybe you're new to art in general, it can be hard to know what to put together that's not going to clash and fight for attention. So this just takes some of that confusion away. But why a color wheel? Is this just a cute little activity that we can hang on our wall? Yeah, kind of. Why not? It is pretty cute, but it's got some uses as well. So you are going to learn valuable lessons about color mixing in this activity. These are 12 really fundamental colors to know how to create. And more specifically, you're going to learn how your chosen primary colors all interact with one another. You can then use this in future as a reference to come back on and figure out how you got to those mixes. And I'll give you some not maths, but some general ratios to help you get there. It's not a perfect science, and a lot of this we have to do by eye. So we do have to drop a bit of the perfectionism here and just aim to get 12 different colors. You can also use this as a bit of a map on complementary colors, colors that neutralize each other, and color schemes. We're going to go through color schemes on the next video on this channel, but you'll need your little color wheel to do that. If you're wondering where to get a template to create your color wheel, you can find both of these outlines in a handout on my website, paintwild.com, in the Wild Colors free course. So it's a color theory course I created that will teach you how to make the color wheel, of course, but also a glazing chart where we take the 12 colors, glaze them over the top of each other, and come up with 144 color mixes from the original 3. And there's also a realistic tiger's eye tutorial included in that, so you get to play around with some neutral colors, brown, black, and gray. If you want an even bigger challenge, an actual color mixing challenge where instead of glazing the colors to get the 144, you actually mix each individual color, this is available in the Paint Wild membership. It's going to take you a couple hours. You will need a lot of patience and a lot of mixing space, but it teaches you a lot. And it's important that my students know how to do that because all the animals that I teach them how to paint are all mixed from the primaries. All right, just a couple of things to note. In the footage, I mix full strength colors, but you're more than welcome to create a color wheel similar to the ones in last week's video where I dilute them at the edges and then you get an idea of the undertones and mass tones. So just paint the saturated color right in the corners of the wedges and then dilute them out with water. And you'll also notice the color mixes I create on the palette. There's a lot of color, but that's because we needed to stretch them further for this activity and the tiger's eye. You don't need to mix that much, but I always say it's better to have too much than not enough because then it can be really hard to get that same color match again, especially if you're just learning. You are going to need some supplies. You're going to need some watercolor paper. It doesn't really matter the quality. This is just about color mixing, playing around with colors, getting to know our supplies. It's not creating perfect portraits. You're going to need a brush. Something like a round size 8 is totally fine. You're going to need your primary colors, water, paper towel, pencil and eraser if you want to trace the outlines of the color wheels, and a palette with plenty of mixing space. So you'll see in the footage, I'm going to use my handy dandy $1, it's got other stuff on there, Kmart dinner plate or side plate. The thing that's really handy about this is because we're painting a circular color wheel, you can position the primary colors in the same position that they'll be on your wheel, and you can put the mixes in between them as well. It's just going to make transferring them over a little bit easier because you don't have to think about where they go. Also, to get the clean lines on this wheel, I used some really thin washi tape just to separate all the wedges, and then I didn't have to wait for them to dry. Let's go create a color wheel. Okay, color wheel time. We are going to be creating a 12 color wheel from 3 primary colors, and these are the 12 main colors that I will mix up and use day to day depending on my subject. Now, we're not going to be talking about the science of color and how it reflects out of your eyeballs or whatever. That's not what I'm an expert at. But we are going to talk about how to create these colors from just 3. Lots of artists have different interpretations of what colors make up this color wheel. We are going to go yellow, yellow, orange, orange, red, orange, red, red, violet, violet, blue, violet, blue, blue, green, green, and yellow, green. And we will have our primary colors in a bit of a triangle here, equally spaced apart. And likewise our secondary colors, which are orange, violet and green, equally spaced out apart as well. And then what you'll find between all of those are the tertiary colors. What you want to do though is try and erase as much of those circles as you can, just so they're not going to shine through your final thing. You can see them very faintly there still on mine, and you can see there that I've also labeled them around the circle so I know where I'm painting each color. I've also underlined the primary colors so I remember where they go. I've also got a little asterisk right here next to red orange. I'm going to talk about why. So as you can see from my completed color wheel, red orange is actually more of a traditional red and primary red is more of a magenta, and that's more based along your printer. If you think of CMYK, K being black, but C being cyan, M for magenta, Y for yellow, those are the ink cartridges, the colors that you use in your printer, and they create really vibrant mixes. And I find that using more of a magenta red and more of a cool leaning blue really helps me get more vibrant mixes. If you've ever experimented with mixing colors before, maybe you've created some really ugly purples that are really dull, and this can often be why when you use that kind of old school fire truck red. So we learnt in primary school that all colors come from the primary colors and you can't mix them up in any other way, but you can actually make this red color from using a magenta and adding a little bit of yellow. So regular red takes the space of red orange on this color wheel, and when I say primary red, I'm referring to our more magenta primary red color. If you're just using what you have and you only have something like a scarlet red or a cadmium red and it's really vibrant fire truck bright red, you can still use it, it's fine. This is just an experiment and you're going to learn from it either way. So when I was learning watercolor, the most frustrating thing for me was people were not telling me exactly how much water to mix up with my colors. Like, give me the milliliters. I want to know how many drops of water I'm putting in. But the truth is there aren't any exact measurements when it comes to things like this. We're doing this by eye. It is variable. Your colors might be harder to activate than mine, so you need more water than mine. We can't be working on exact measurements or it's just not going to work. We can't get too caught up in all of that. We just need to judge it by eye and create 12 colors that all look different from one another. So I was talking about the layout before, how we've got the primary colors here evenly apart, and then between those are the secondary colors. So here we've got, let's talk about these, we've got primary yellow and primary red, and then halfway in between them is orange. So if we have 100% primary yellow and 100% primary red, and we mix those together, it would be easy to assume that this would then be 50% of each color to get that. And likewise with green, 50% of these two, and violet, 50% of these two. But that's not going to always be the case. Colors can be stronger than others. So I often find that my blue is really overpowering, or when I'm mixing red and yellow, the red is more overpowering. So you might actually have more yellow in the mixture to create this middle of the road orange than you do red. So don't get too caught up in creating exact puddles with exact amounts of yellow and red. We really just want to learn how to mix something that's somewhere in the middle of those two. So we're just aiming for a difference. We don't want these three colors to all look the same as primary red. So don't get too hung up on the mixing ratios. Adjust them as necessary because we've got to stretch them even further. We need to create a yellow orange, and then we need to create something in between the orange and the magenta, being the traditional red. So we can't get too hung up on the ratios. We need to aim for these colors. But you know, if percentages for whatever reason do help you, if we've got 100 here, 100 here, 50-50 here, then this theoretically should be 75-25, and this one here 25-75, and this being 75% primary yellow, the primary that it's closest to, and 25% the primary that it's further away from. This would be 25% primary yellow that it's furthest from, and 75% primary that it's closest to. But like I mentioned, we can't get hung up on ratios because it might not create the color we're after. We just need to try and aim for differentiation. So if you're new to mixing or maybe even new to watercolor, this is going to be a great tool and something for you to look back on in future as a point of reference for what colors to aim for. And if you're thinking, well, why? Like, I don't do anything with bright colors. Why on earth would I need these? And especially me being a wildlife artist, you might be thinking, well, what animals are you painting that looks like this lady? Well, the cool thing about color mixing is, and color theory, this tool is amazing because every set of colors that is directly opposite each other on the wheel are complementary colors. So not only does this mean these colors can complement each other in a painting, but they also create neutral colors. So whenever I'm mixing a brown, I'm always mixing these two babies together, primary blue, and then I mix up an orange. For me, they create an amazing brown. And if I put more blue in it than orange, then I get this kind of dirty, dark blue gray color. But then if I put more orange in it than the blue, then I get a range of different browns. So this is a great tool for looking back on. You know, you might be creating, let's say, a bee, a watercolor bee, and you're thinking, okay, I've got a lot of yellow. Well, what should the black be based out of if I mix a black? And yes, you can mix black from these colors. Well, look opposite. You can have a very heavy biased violet black to your mixture, and that's going to complement the yellow perfectly. You could even have the violet in the background, and that's going to perfectly complement the yellow. So this is a great tool, not only for just having a point of reference of what colors to aim for when you're mixing, but also just for telling you which ones are gonna make mud. All right, enough chatting, let's start mixing. Okay, so you wanna make sure you've got your sheet of paper, you have traced your circles down, you have labeled them all, and you've erased as much of the outline as you can. And then you want your primary colors set up on your palette with lots of mixing space. And we are gonna start off by painting the primary colors in directly into their little circles because they are the pure 100% colors going in. So I'm just dipping into some water, dabbing off some excess, and then I'm going to gently rub the top of this pan to activate the yellow and paint that directly into the circle. Adding some more water because it is not running enough for me to spread. And my circles are a bit wonky, so I'm just gonna wing it and adjust them as I need. I'm gonna rinse that color off now. And then we can do the same with our red, which is our more magenta primary red. Now these primary colors are going to be the most saturated colors on our wheel most likely. And don't get discouraged if your secondaries or your tertiaries look a little bit more washed out because you're adding more water to be able to create those. And you'll see in a moment when we mix them on the palette that we have to dilute them. So the primaries will be the richest and everything else we mix will be slightly more diluted. Rinsing these off, back into the warm jar. Can't remember if I said that would be cool or warm, but it's going to be warm now. And then we can activate primary blue. Now, if you're using tube watercolor, then you will just be squeezing the primary colors out onto your palette. It is okay to use those while they're still damp. You don't have to let them dry all the way. A lot of artists do though, just so they're not using so much of it. Usually when you use color fresh from the tube, it can be a little overpowering and a little wasteful. All right, there we go. We have got our primary colors all painted in. 9 to go. Okay, so now we are going to get started on our secondary colors, our green, our orange, and our violet. And like I mentioned, it's not going to be a 50-50 mix. So I am going to create a puddle, and I want this puddle to be large enough that not only am I going to be able to mix extra yellow on one side and extra red on the other to create the tertiaries, but I want enough color in this for another activity, creating a glazing chart. So this time I'm going to dip into water and I'm going to activate the yellow and start dragging it out into a separate puddle on my mixing space. Now to keep track of this a little easier, I'm going to put the puddle directly between the colors that I'm mixing so that everything is kind of lined up where it should be and I don't get confused. It doesn't matter if you create more of a puddle than what you need for these activities. Watercolour can be reactivated, so you can always reuse these puddles at a later time. I like to swipe my brush off on the edges as well, just so I'm not rinsing all of that colour away. Colour likes to hide right up in the ferrule, sounds like the ferrule, right in the part where the metal meets the bristles. So just give that a good dab to try and get that all out. Blue is what usually hides in there for me. I'm dipping into red now. And what you want to do is you want to thoroughly mix this through the puddle before deciding if you need to add extra, because it can be a little bit deceiving. You'll think, oh yep, I do not have enough. And then once you actually mix it all the way through, you indeed do have enough. Now this is looking a little more on the yellow-orange side for me. So I'm going to add more red to this. I'm going to mix it all the way through, swipe off the excess, rinse off. And add a little bit more. You might go too far the other way and have to add more yellow. Don't stress, it's all fun and games. I often am readjusting mixes when I'm painting in the real world because I've gone too far one way. This is looking like a pretty good orange to me, so I'm going to paint that in my circle. I probably even could have gone a little bit darker, but this is all right. And by that I mean add a little bit more primary red. I think it'll dry okay. Okay, we're going to leave that puddle alone now and we'll come back to it when we are up to our tertiaries, but I am going to move on to another secondary. I'm going to go back into my yellow and start creating a puddle for green. And just like with the other mixture, I always find that I need more yellow than the other primary. I just find that the blue and the red is stronger than the yellow. And it's really common to feel like you are wasting lots of paint doing this, but we are learning. And of course, if you are only using 3 colours to create all of yours, then you will burn through them faster than if you had these as all convenience colours. When you're activating the pans and grabbing colour from there, you want to try and grab as much as you can so that the water is not just coming across into this puddle and massively diluting it. You want to try and really load it up with paint. It's okay if you do get watery puddles though, this is all an experiment and you will learn from it either way. Dipping into blue now. Fully load up on this brush and dip in. And I think by the time I mix this through, it's going to be too light, so I might need a bit more blue. Just a little bit, I think. Because we still have to create our sort of tennis ball limey green. Colour's getting nice and bright now in the water jar. Gosh, I might even need a bit more. Just a tad. People freak out a lot of the time that they have run out of paint, they didn't mix enough. That's why we are doing this and learning this, so you know what to aim for each and every time. Gosh, I think I still need more. It's annoying. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I'm going to use this green now and paint it in. And now we can make our last secondary colour violet. If I end up saying purple, I mean violet. I use them interchangeably. Now these are our two strongest primaries, but I'll probably need a little bit more red than blue. If you can see your brush strokes in there as well and it feels like really thick and gluggy and you don't like that, just add a little bit of water. I'm not going to bother because I'm about to do that when I add my clean brush to the blue pan. I think I'm going to need just a little bit more red in this. Just a little. It's just a little bit too blue-violet. And that's looking pretty good. You can still see my brush stroke, so there is a little bit less water in this mixture, but that's okay. And rinsing that off. Okay, now we can start making our tertiary colours. So I like to do this by adding a little bit of yellow to this side to create yellow-orange, and then a little bit more red to this side to create red-orange, or our traditional red, and then we should still have all three mixes that we can use again later for our glazing chart. Still got lots of colour stuck in my brush, but we will persist. So let's dip into yellow and start adding it to this side here. If you have wells, then you can create these colours in separate spaces. You might want to lift some orange into different wells to do that. Because this will travel, but I'm not too fussed. I really like this colour that I'm getting here. I think it's a nice in-between of these two. I think I might actually put a bit more yellow in it. And then I'm going to paint that in. So you can see now it's starting to get a bit watery on the colour wheel. It's not going to be as punchy as the others. You know what? I don't think that's different enough. I think we actually need a bit more orange in this mix. And I've just dipped my side of my hand into red and then stamped it on the table, so that's going really awesomely. I'm going to clean that up. Okay, let's continue. Now this time we want a colour that's going to look more like our traditional red colour. So we're going to grab primary red and add it to this side here, till we get a nice regular looking red. I've got a lot of colour that wants to come for a visit, so I might need to add a little bit more. Probably too much. This is looking like a good traditional red. No, I need more. It won't stop coming over. Look at that flow. I'm going to grab this colour while it's good. So you can see there, that is a much more traditional looking red. Okay, let's do our green side now. Well, this creates artwork of its own. Now, of course, you could have moved the orange into separate puddles, but I figured they were going to touch anyway, so I didn't bother. Let's add some more yellow to this side of the green. And we are looking for something in between, a nice limey, lemony kind of green. That's looking pretty good. I just want a bit more of a puddle. Pretty happy with that colour, so I'm going to grab it. And pop that in our yellow green. And now we can move on to our blue-green, which is going to be a nice turquoisey colour. I'm very fond of anything turquoise. And dip into our blue and create that on this side. And we're going to need more than that. Table really must be on an angle. Everything just keeps pouring down this way. Still want it to be a little bit bluer than that. But there is a big difference between those three colours in this puddle, so we're winning in that regard, but still just a little bit too green for me. This is something more that I'm after, but it's not going to stay there for long. Yeah, that's perfect. And this is why having this colour wheel is great, because you're going to be able to reference it again when you are aiming for a turquoisey kind of colour. You're going to know it sits somewhere between blue and green. Last two now. Let's hope this doesn't run anywhere. So we want to create a nice kind of blue-violet colour here. It ends up being quite a dark colour, which is nice. So let's dip into blue again. And this time let's add it over here. That's looking pretty good there. It's nice and dark. This puddle has definitely remained thick, so these colours are probably going to look darker than some of the others. Rinse that off. And then we need our primary red to create kind of like a mauvey red colour, a mauvey purple colour I should say. I'm running out of violet here, so let's see if we can manage this. I need more red in the mixture anyway, so I might just stretch it out over here and hopefully just add a little bit of the violet. And this is the kind of colour I'm looking for. One of my favourites. Just going to add a bit more water to this mixture and paint it in. Gorgeous. I'm going to dry this off now so you can see it in its completed form. There is our completed color wheel. The paper is very telling, isn't it? So this is Fabriano Artistico. I find it a little less forgiving than Arches, but you can see the ones that I messed with the most, those two colors. You can see some harsh edges around the border and some blooms in the middle. And these ones, which is the thickest mixture on my palette, you can actually see the brush strokes still remained, whereas the rest were a little smoother. This is not, I would say, common for other, like I use Arches more often than not, but I wanted to try this out because I wanted to show you it doesn't matter. Like, we're just looking for colors. It doesn't matter if we get this stuff in there, but it is an interesting little thing for you to know as well, that sometimes things just happen with watercolor. There you go. Now you know how to turn 3 primary watercolors into 12, and there is so much more that you can do with them. If you want to learn a bit more about what else you can do with them, maybe make the glazing chart, do the realistic tiger's eye, check out Wild Colors on paintwild.com. And then I'll also have the downloadable printable template for the 2 color wheel designs as well. If you've got any questions about the color wheel activity or color mixing in general, feel free to leave a comment below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.